Hi, my name is David Scharff, and today we're going to practice Shi-Nay meditation. Shi-Nay is Tibetan for peaceful being or calm abiding. Shi means peace and Nay means being. The translation can also be rendered as being peaceful. So this practice is very fundamental and basic in Buddhism and in other spiritual traditions because it's simply the practice of letting go of clinging, letting go of tension of body, speech, and mind, letting go of clinging to the idea of a separate self. All of our suffering comes from clinging to the idea of a separate self, a self that's separate from other people, a self that's separate from the world. So that clinging is what causes our suffering. And when we learn to let go of clinging through meditation, that's how we find freedom from suffering. So the first step is for us to sit in the proper posture so that our energy can flow naturally. The whole practice is about letting things come to rest in their natural state. We can return to our true nature. So first we sit with our hands resting on our legs. If you're sitting on the floor, your legs are crossed. Spine is straight up to the base of the skull. You tuck your chin in just a little bit so that you can really feel the head sitting on the top of the spine. And in this tradition, you leave your eyes open slightly and focus on a spot in front of you. You also leave your teeth and lips parted. In this way, you have all 5 senses open. So get yourself in the posture first. Hands resting, spine straight, chin tucked, eyes open, teeth and lips parted. And the last point of the posture is you touch the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth, right where it would be when you say L, L. You put it right there. Hands resting, spine straight, chin tucked, eyes open, teeth and lips parted, tongue touching the roof of the mouth. We start in this posture. We take a deep breath in and exhale. So in order to let go of clinging, we have to remember that the beginning, the middle, and the end of the meditation, all 3 parts, we are letting go in different ways. In the beginning, we establish a motivation, an altruistic motivation, to work for the benefit of others by doing our practice, meditating for the benefit of others. We're not just doing this for ourselves. We put others first. So we think, for the benefit of all beings who are suffering because of clinging to the idea of a separate self, I'm going to sit and let go. By establishing that motivation, the power of our practice really expands. As wide as we can consider other beings, our practice spreads. So we sit in the posture, deep breath, and we say to ourselves, for the benefit of all beings who are suffering because of clinging to the idea of a self that's separate, I'm going to sit down and meditate and let go of that clinging myself. The practice of Shinae means coming to rest in our own natural, peaceful state. So the peaceful state applies to our body, it applies to our speech, it applies to our mind. The body, speech, and mind, they're not separate things, but they're separate aspects of our being. The body is the manifestation, the speech is the expression, and the mind is the essence. So the body, when it's in its natural state, it's resting in stillness. If we let go of the body and let it settles naturally in stillness. So we sit and we let go of the body. We've started with the posture, but now we let go, we relax and let the body settle. We're sitting in stillness and the breath is flowing naturally. And then with our speech, we let that settle. Our mode of expressing ourselves, we let it settle, we let speech come to rest, and it comes to rest in its natural state, which is silence. Its natural peaceful state is silence. So we're sitting, the body is resting in its natural state of peace, which is stillness. The speech is resting in its natural state of peace, which is silence. We take a deep breath in. Exhale. And relax. And letting go of mind, that's the subtle part. It's not so easy to notice letting go of mind because we don't know that we're clinging with the mind. The mind isn't visible, the mind isn't palpable, so we don't know how we're clinging. But we're clinging all the time to this idea of a self as being distinct, as being real, and as being separate from everything that we're experiencing. So that duality that we've created of self and other, it's an idea, it's a story we're telling ourselves. It's hard to believe it's not real. Every waking moment we believe it's real, even when we're sleeping. We're clinging to the idea of a self that's separate from the other people that we meet in a dream, from the places that we go, but all of these things are not actually separate from us. They're happening in our own mind. It's the same way when we're awake. We believe that we're separate. All day, all night, we're clinging to this idea of a self as being real, as being inherently real in its own way, separate and distinct. So with the mind, the way that this manifests is that we have ourselves as the perceiver, the subject, and we have everything that we perceive through our five senses, which are the objects. And in order to let go of clinging to self and other as being separate, we have to learn to work with the spaces in between. So everything that we perceive, whatever we see or hear, whatever we smell, whatever we feel, we taste, we experience those objects of the senses through the space around us. We couldn't see unless the space was open. We wouldn't be able to hear unless those sound waves were riding through space. Smell, taste, touch, all of these senses require the space around us. So in order to let go of clinging to self and other as being separate, we shift our focus from the objects of the senses to this space that's around us, the space that we perceive everything through. Whatever we're looking at, we see that object, we bring our attention back into the space that we're looking through. Whatever we hear the sound, but we bring our attention back to the fact that there's space around us that we're hearing through. By doing this, we're letting go of grasping at these objects. We still see, we still hear, but rather than being focused on that object, that sound, we're shifting our focus to the space. It's almost as if we're looking through a pane of glass into the landscape, and we're shifting our focus to the fact that there's this glass. Even if it's polished and clean and you can see right through it, it's there. We shift our focus to the space that we're looking through, that we're hearing through. So take a deep breath in. Exhale, and as you exhale, relax and let your mind rest in the space that surrounds you. Breathe naturally. You hear sounds, you see objects. The habit is to follow after them, to take them to be solid, to take them to be real. Just shift your perspective back into the space that you're perceiving through. Take a deep breath in. Exhale. And relax. In doing this, we're relaxing our hold on the object as being separate from the subject. We're releasing that clinging. But then we also have to release the clinging to the subject, the self. So we have to turn that attention within to look in our own mind. if we look into our mind, we can see that there are certain kinds of thoughts that are always arising, always moving, and always dissolving in our mind. What happens first is that the five senses draw in information we perceive through those five senses, and they come together into an experience of the present moment. And then in the instant after that experience, the first thoughts that happen are we start to name the experience. So if we're looking at the wall or at the floor, we're looking at the sky, that instant experience is just sensory. But a second later, we start naming it wall, floor, sky. That's that first level of thought that we're putting between ourselves and the experience itself. So we can look, we can notice that we're doing that all the time. And then once we label it, then we start to make a judgment of whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, whether it's beautiful or ugly, whether it's a nice sound or an awful sound, a sweet smell or an awful smell. We start to make a judgment based on our experience of it. And that positive or negative duality, that's what starts to kind of densify and intensify our sense of a self as being separate. Because the minute that we label it, then we start comparing it to our memories of experiencing those things before. So there's an instant of perception, there's an instant of labeling, and then there's an instant in which memory floods into the present moment. So if we look at a dog and we see a dog, naming it dog in our mind, if we have a history of loving dogs, then immediately we think dog is good. If we have a history of being afraid of dogs, as soon as we label dog, we think dog is bad. We do this with everything. Immediately upon naming something, our memory floods in and it moves us towards or away from that object of the senses. The power of memory is that it floods into the present moment and affirms our judgment of whether something is good or bad. And it moves us towards it or away from it, towards what we love, away from what we hate. So if we look into our mind and we can see, these are the thoughts that arise. There's the thought that labels what we perceive. Then there's the memories that help us decide whether we like it or we don't. And then there's the anticipation, the movement towards or away from what we like and we don't like. That's that third action of thought, the thought of anticipation. So there's the experience, there's the labeling, there's the recollection of memory, and there's the anticipation of where we go. And all of those happen in an instant. So if we look into our mind, we can notice this is what's going on all the time. So look into the mind at these thoughts, labeling, recollection, anticipation. Take a deep breath in. Exhale and relax. The thoughts are still there, we're just noticing them, dancing around in our head, moving around in our head, and we're shifting our focus to the space in which they're moving. It's like stepping back from the river and watching the flow of the river rather than being in it and being caught up in it. So now we're sitting with our spine straight, our hands resting, our chin tucked, our eyes open, our teeth and lips parted slightly, our tongue touching the roof of the mouth. We take a deep breath in, and when we exhale, we let our mind rest in the space that we're perceiving through and in the space in which thoughts arise. And in this way, we're letting go of clinging to subject and object as being separate, because the openness around us and the openness in our mind, they're both openness. We can call them by one name, openness. So we're letting go into the openness around us and the openness within us. Take a deep breath in, and when you exhale, relax into the openness. Breathe naturally. The body is resting in stillness. The speech is resting in silence. The mind of perception is resting in the openness around you. And the mind of experience, the mind of the self, is resting in the openness in which thoughts of self arise, in which thoughts move, and in which thoughts dissolve. You take a deep breath in. Exhale. And relax. So again, when we come to the bottom of the breath, we inhale, we exhale, we come to rest at the bottom of the breath for as long as it's comfortable. When we get there, we just quickly go through body, let go, speech, breathing naturally, mind, shift the focus to the openness around us through which we perceive, experience of the self, shift the focus from the thoughts to the space and openness in which they arise. Body, speech, mind of perception, mind of experience, all coming to rest at the bottom of the breath. And feel what that feels like. Whatever moves, whatever shifts, just let it come to rest and feel what that feels like. So inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Come to rest. And breathe naturally. As soon as you need to inhale, you inhale. Resume the natural flow of your breath. But when you resume that flow, hold on to that feeling if you can, without clinging. Hold on to that feeling of stillness, that moment of peace, where you're present in peace. That feeling of peace, that's what you want to get to know and become comfortable with. That's the essence of this practice, resting in that peaceful present moment. So take a deep breath in. Exhale slowly. Let go of body, let go of speech, let go of mind into openness, free of clinging. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Come to rest. That's the practice. Whether you go for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, the process is just that breathing and coming to rest, letting the body sit in stillness, letting the speech rest in silence, letting the mind rest in openness, the openness through which you perceive, and the openness in which thoughts arise, in which thoughts move, and in which thoughts dissolve. Rest the mind in that openness and breathe naturally. And then we conclude the practice with dedication. So we started with this altruistic motivation to benefit others, all beings who are suffering because they cling to the idea of a separate self just like we do. We think about all those beings who are suffering because of clinging to the idea of a separate self, and we sit down to meditate and let go of ourself to benefit them. And then when we're meditating, we're letting go of self over and over again with our breath, over and over again, letting go of clinging to subject, letting go of clinging to object, with every breath, relaxing and letting go. And then at the end of the practice, we say whatever positive energy we've generated in doing this, and especially in doing it for the benefit of others, whatever positive energy, whatever merit we've created, we take this good energy and we give it to all the beings that we sat down to benefit. We say, may all of this positive energy, may all of this merit go out to the beings for whom I sat down to practice. May all beings benefit. May they all be free of the suffering caused by clinging to self and other as being separate. That's how we conclude. There's motivation, there's meditation, and there's dedication. And in all three steps, we're shifting the focus away from the self, away from clinging to the idea of a self, because that's the source of our suffering. Thank you. So in our next video, I'll give you some other methods and techniques that you can use to enhance this state of rest that we can come to through this practice. There are tools that we can use because not everybody can rest in the openness of space right away. So there are ways in which to enhance that stillness, ways in which we can work with thought if we can't let go of it, and ways in which we can adjust if there's agitation of the mind or if the mind gets dull and sleepy, both of which happen to everybody who tries to practice. So come back and I'll help you some more.